I am Trevor Rickman. I'm the manager of digital marketing services and lead strategist at Yeeboo Digital. Joining me is our senior business and technology analyst, Rena, who knows all things technology and certainly knows all things engaging networks, so much so that I think our friends at Engaging Networks secretly have meetings with her to train her on all the things that it does. We're from Yeeboo Digital. What is an Yeeboo? Which is something we get a lot of questions about. It is first and foremost a word that I am convinced has thousands of pronunciations, so much so that we have a Slack channel dedicated to phonetic spelling of Yeeboo that we hear. More than that, we are a fundraising and EN partner for over 12 years, helping nonprofits like yourselves implement technology, run fundraising campaigns, consult, and act as emotional support when all of you lovely people need it, and many other roles that I'm sure your friends at agencies will attest to. As Sean mentioned, what we're talking about is ChatGPT. I know we asked this question yesterday. I'm going to ask it again. How many people have played with this program before? Everyone, right? What we're hoping to accomplish is just showing, from our perspective, some of the helpful prompts that have allowed us to create or show clients how to create some of the content that I know you're looking to create with it. ChatGPT is an AI language model. You know, George mentioned yesterday, it is not the first AI language model. It's one that certainly has proliferated largely because it uses natural language processing, which essentially means you can talk to it like a person. The model that it uses was developed by a company called OpenAI, an organization that was initially supposed to be a nonprofit. They are not, let's say, a nonprofit. They've decided to go a different road. But what they've done is they've introduced something that otherwise wasn't available, which is context awareness, right? We're able to put in things and have it understand what it is we're trying to get out of it. And in doing so, it's made it incredibly accessible, and it's created a wide range of applications. There's certainly, for our purposes here, we're going to talk about content creation, but you know, for those of you that do data processing, that are looking at data analytics, it is incredibly helpful. This is from my own use of it in developing really complex, say, Excel formulas where you're looking to create attribution models for things like connected television based on time decay. You know, things that would otherwise take an incredibly long time to do, we now have available to us in a matter of minutes. Now, of course, a lot of this is largely dependent on the prompts that you put in. What's made it so revolutionary is that it's two things. We talked about its ability to understand natural language models. It's also incredibly good at predicting, right? So it knows, given the amount of information that's come in, it's quite good at predicting what word should come next in an answer, given the sort of information access that it has. And in this case, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the internet is what it claims to have read. It's a lot of information, and it's able to quickly decipher, given the prompts that you give it, what exactly to kick out. What I think has made it proliferate so quickly is that it's the barrier to entry is quite low. For our sector, that I think is why this has become such a hot topic. There are very, very few technologies that we've been able to use as quickly as the for-profit sector, right? Often we're relying on the for-profit sector to bring down the cost of entry to be accessible to us. In this case, it's a free program. Now, certainly Karen from HJC had some opinions about free programs, and there certainly is ethical implications to be considered, right, about putting data out there. Some of that we're going to talk about here. Some of it obviously is a larger conversation to be had internally at your organizations, and something that I think we encourage you to have sooner rather than later, because as I think Charlie would attest to, and certainly we would agree with, this is coming. I mean, it would be ignorant of us not to have these conversations now, because we're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. This, I think, is a great quote, which is like, what is the difference between the AI that was previously accessible to us and the AI that ChatGPT offers? And really, it's context understanding, right? Certainly, things like marketing automations have in engaging networks have some degree of AI required in order to execute those automations. What previous programs haven't done is allow for us to input things that are unique to our particular case scenario, right? So as a nonprofit, we have a very particular value proposition. All of you within your organization can be within the healthcare vertical, but you do things very differently. You can be in the environmental vertical, but you have something unique to offer potential donors. And that piece of this program is what has made it so powerful. I made notes, none of which I've referred to. We're gonna take you through a demo. Not understanding how big this room was, this, for those of you with bad eyes, is gonna be near impossible. So I am going to do my best to talk you through what's happening here. Essentially, what we've tried to do is create a use case for creating content from start to finish, right? So what does it actually look like to create ads, to create emails, to create marketing automations for different segments of your population? Now, in this case, we have a made-up charity, which is, the first question here is, what is the organization? It is called Uniting for Greener Tomorrows. It's a terrible name, but it's one that we're rolling with. Essentially, what the point is here is that you need to contextualize who you are. And it's kind of what we just talked about. What is your value proposition? I was speaking to a client recently who was looking to use this, and they were saying the issue that they're finding is that it's pulling information from what it has available. And of course, we don't know what that is. I spoke yesterday about starting to catalog your digital footprint. Like, what is out there that's actually informing this program on what your organization does? I'll pause it there. What I said to them is because we don't have that sort of insight right now, the best thing you can do is limit, try and reduce the amount of information it's using to create the output. So a great place to go for the context are things like your annual reports and your strategic plans. What you're trying to do, and what we look to do in a lot of our marketing materials, is create a future state, right? You're trying to show donors what things are going to look like should they get involved. Here's the impact you can have. Here's the difference things are going to make. And a lot of that information is often held in those strategic plans. I think we all would love for a better roadmap when those strategic plans come out, but it should give you a place to start providing and limiting the amount of information that the system is using to actually produce the output. So that's step one, frame the issue, frame who you are. Step two, in our case, is create the audiences. This is where ChatGPT falls short. I mentioned yesterday that it's amalgamating everything it knows about the nonprofit sector. So it's creating very generic audience profiles about that it imagines would respond well to Uniting for a Greener Tomorrow, right? So it's taking what it knows about general environmentalism. Well, we know that there's such important nuances between different environmental organizations that I think here is really where you need to be paying attention to your data input. If you have donor profiles, this is a great place to use them, because what it is very, very good at doing is understanding context, as we mentioned before. As individuals, especially in organizations where you may be one or one of two people actually creating content, it's difficult to be critical of your own work sometimes. This has no problem doing that. And so it can create variance. Yeah, it's a humbling experience if you've ever used it for this type of content and asked for feedback. I think it's important that you're in places where you're using the output. So in this case, email and ad copy. The input is based in fact, it's based in reality, right? So your strat plan, your annual plan, your data or your donor profiles are gonna make sure that the output is specific to your organization. It's not quite, at least in our experience, at a place where it can produce that context by itself. So as of now, it relies on context that we give it, and of course that's going to come from the data that you have available. Now, Chris talked yesterday about having the basics and the fundamentals in place before you really start to focus on this stuff. And I do think this is a really good example. If you don't know who your donors are, it's not going to do a very good job at producing content that's specific to them. So the emphasis in that case, we would say is, look, go find out who your donors are, survey them, invest in real market research, figure out what segments of the population, if acquisition is a priority, are most susceptible to your ask. I'm not sure if I time this right. This, I think, is interesting because it does amalgamate information. If you put in who your donors are as a segment of the population, so their age, their interests, where they live in terms of channels, and you know all this information, what it is good at doing is actually pulling out tone and writing style for individual donor segments. So if what we're looking to do, and engaging networks is an incredibly powerful tool, right? It has all of it has this ability to create marketing automations. What it requires in order to make full use of those marketing automations is personalized content, which can be laborious. It's a lift, and we get it, right? We get it all the time, where we want, as agency partners, clients to produce 10 emails for their 10 email segments over a 5 email series. And the client looks at us cross-eyed and says there's no chance, we don't have the capacity. What this is allowing you to do is, first of all, allow it to recognize the tone and content, and then secondly, allow it to produce content based on the writing style that it identified. And I think it's a really good way to produce a mass amount of volume with a lot less effort up front. So in this case, what you're seeing is for the eco-conscious millennial, which again is not the right segment, your writing style is casual, conversational, engaging. The tone is positive, optimistic, and motivational. For green parents, it's informative, supportive, and empathetic. The tone is encouraging, nurturing, and educational. So it's differentiating the two, which I know can be a challenge for us, right? Is creating content that's unique to a specific individual. And this is a great way to do that. Again, as long as the information input is real. The next piece here is we're going to start to talk about ads. So I want to be conscious of time here. The important piece here is identify the channel and identify the value, because what you're going to get out if you don't be very specific is very generic. Now, I've asked it to essentially create a lead generation ad for a newsletter, right? So what I've done is I've identified the benefits to joining that newsletter. Because otherwise, if you don't get specific about the value exchange, you're going to get, again, very, very generic answers. Sign up to save the environment, which, of course, we all know is not going to work. The more particular we can get, the better. So specificity, again, especially as it relates to the value exchange when you're asking it to create content. There's a lot of ad copy here. I thought it was really important people saw multiple versions. Geez. Right. So this is where things get fun. So what I asked when I kept it in, and for the purposes of time, we won't look at it, but when I first asked it to write ad copy, I didn't actually distinguish wanting the two different tones that it had come up with. So it's important that at each stage, it's sort of like a child. You have to tell it a lot of times in a lot of different ways to do the thing you've already asked it to do. So we asked it to identify tone, then we asked it to write ad copy, and it only gave us one variant of the ad copy, not specific to the tones that it had created. This is the same thing. This next piece is about an email welcome series. We've asked it to create a 5 or 3 email welcome series introducing the organization. First, we've asked it to create the outline, right? So in this case, I've actually trusted it to create the context because we've already input the audiences. So the context in this case is its outline. Whoop. I don't need that. It's outlining who the audiences are, and then essentially what each of the 3 emails should do. From there, we've gone ahead and asked it to produce the email copy. Our party line right now at Yeeboo for this is augmentation, not replacement, right? It's never going to be perfect. If you are careful about how you use it, it can be a very powerful tool, and the output you get should put you in a better place to start to work on it yourselves. But there's no doubt that it's certainly going to require some human eyes, especially in this sector where we rely so heavily on emotional intelligence. Now, again, where it becomes super helpful is when you start to look at things like the marketing automations and engaging networks. Because you can produce a lot of emails for a lot of very specific segments, it's quite easy to mature what can be a daunting task, right? When we talk about maturing an email strategy, often what that means is becoming more personalized. And I think the roadblock for a lot of organizations is simply the content creation. They know what they need to do, but the manpower required to create the blog posts and the emails specific to the individual profiles is a pretty big lift. This, from our perspective, certainly for small organizations. Large organizations can sometimes have the benefit of multiple people, though even in that case, there's an argument to be had that a lot of the channels that we're being asked about, things like TikTok and Twitter, require high volumes. We have clients all the time who ask us whether or not TikTok is a place that they should go to, and my answer to that is there is value there, but what you have to be prepared to do is post 3 to 5 times a day in order to get any sort of real footing in organic growth. So it's great at producing a lot very quickly for very particular audiences. The final piece, and I'm not sure if anybody's played around with this, though I'm sure Rena and I have different opinions, is the HTML output that it can give you. Now, certainly the new email tool in EN hopefully will make all of our lives a little bit easier as marketers, but I do think there's certainly a place. Do you think I would hit that space bar one more time? There is certainly a place for HTML emails, and being able to get the HTML straight out of ChatGPT, certainly for the text. Now, again, there is going to need to be a developer to ensure your banners are in the right place and your buttons are functioning appropriately. But if you are an organization, if you are a person that is doing multiple jobs, and one of those jobs is actually producing emails right now in the old email tool, if you haven't yet migrated, this is certainly a good place to produce some of that HTML content. I'm going to hand it over to Rena, who is going to tell you all of the things you should look out for, as I am incredibly optimistic.
Thanks, Star. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm just going to play these videos and talk. You probably won't be able to see, but how many people have tried to use the organization form tool in EN? Okay, you all know it doesn't exist, right? How many issues have you had with creating a form specifically for organizations? So I asked ChatGPT, and this is where we're going to talk about what not to use ChatGPT for. I asked it to tell me, how do I create an organization form in EN? And it was like, oh, simple. Just go to the organization tab in EN. I was like, I don't think there is one there. So really good at content creation, really good at, if you need Excel formulas, go in there and you're like, hey, how do I, do this in Excel? How do I create a validator? That it will give you. Like if you want to just have like 10 digits in a field, it will give you that expression. What it won't give you are instructions on how to use engaging networks. That you still need someone like us to help you with. You need engaging networks. You need special technical help there. So not to use it for certain analysis. It's very imaginative. It's very creative. It makes things up. So this is just me going through the instructions going, wait a minute. There is no organization form tab, okay? So one thing not to use engaging ChatGPT for. How do I get to the next screen? I have to stop it first. Thank you. So ChatGPT, very imaginative, very biased. It has a limited context, as they say when you use it. You can create the content, you can get some formulas, but just understand its limitations. And it's always looking for approval. So the program works where if you don't like what it's given you, it's like thumbs up or thumbs down. If it's a thumbs down, it's going to try again. and it's going to keep trying. So some of the instructions or help it provides you, it will keep going, right? So you want to at some point realize, this guy's not getting it. Let's move on. And you're going to have to like sort of figure some things out for yourself. So we just want to sort of give you a heads up in terms of, yes, please feel free to use it, but you're still going to kind of need to rely on your own discretion, your own critical thinking to understand, is this accurate? Okay, so you also want to be careful with the content it creates as well. Always have to verify what it gives you. Check it out, make sure it's accurate and true. And I can give you one example. My friends and I asked, how are Smurfs created? Now, if anyone remembers Smurfs, they were like those little blue cartoon creatures. And they're like, how are Smurfs created? It's like, oh, well, they have these eggs and they hatch the eggs and they, fertilize them. And it was very imaginative, but I don't know if anyone ever watched Smurfs. There were never any eggs. Like that did not happen. They were just kind of created by magic. So just remember what you're dealing with. It is a tool, and you still need the human to decipher, is this usable? And I think that's about it. So we're from Yeeboo Digital. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, let's do a question. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been playing around with a lot of different, AI tools and ChatGPT. I mean, I'd say the main thing that I use it for pretty regularly is doing a lot of brainstorming work, especially a lot of us are working from home now. You're not in an office. You can't just, I can no longer just like grab Clint and just like, talk his ear off for like 10 minutes about something, right? And having something that you can just like, you can just type into and have a brainstorming, session is really nice and a really nice way to kind of introduce yourself into utilizing it. So we did have some questions come in. So how does ChatGPT compare with Microsoft's Copilot for spreadsheet formulas and analysis? They're kind of entirely different things.
Yeah, truthfully, I would not be the question to ask. I would not be the person to answer that question.
Honesty.
Yeah, well, I could make it up, but somebody's going to call me out on it. George, who I think is sitting at the back, might be the person to ask that question to.
I mean, you have a lot of different tools that are out there, right? And I think it's finding the use case that works in that specific case. I mean, if you go on LinkedIn, there is some thought leader posting 100 new AI things that came out this week that you have to check out, which most of them are probably bunk. But there is some good out there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the number of programs that have proliferated make it pretty daunting. I think, the benefit with this program is that, as I mentioned, the barrier to entry is quite low, right? That you can trial it without committing to something. And if you're an organization, I was laughing with George yesterday about being an expert in this space right now in our vertical is really just being the person that tries it the most and reads the most. And so if you're looking to become an expert, I would encourage you to try certainly this, but any other programs that, offer free trials that are easily accessible, simply because you're going to get a feel pretty quickly of what works and what doesn't for you. I think that this has become synonymous with the gold standard, but that doesn't mean it's going to be right for your organization or what you're looking for as an individual resource.
Have you A/B tested the creative augmented by ChatGPT, and does it perform better or worse?
Not yet. I think, and I say that only to say we haven't taken the copy as it is given to us, right? Like there's always, in our case, in cases where clients have been on board to try it and to use it, there's always some degree of human interference. So if any of you trust it enough, feel free to give us a call and we will be happy to run that program for you. Though, as you saw, Uniting for Greener Tomorrows, it probably isn't attracting many donors.
Well, I think you touched on one of the important things is there's a whole lot of ways you can classify the tasks that AI can complement, and it's a continuum. Yeah. And I like that right now your focus is on the emergent qualities of utilizing AI as an assistant to a human, right? There's also like replacement right? Low-level, repetitive tasks that have to get done, right? That can be really nice. And I think most organizations are in a situation where, as you explore this, you kind of have to decide, where am I going to focus my time initially, right? Ideally, you want to look at all of it, but most organizations, just no matter the size, it's just too big of a scale, right? And so, like Sam, on our team, her and I had a conversation about utilizing AI, from the support side of things, and like, what's our primary focus going to be? And we've decided that it is taking our knowledge base, our supportal, our academy articles, our wikis that we have, our Stack Overflow, and getting that into a place with a chatbot for our internal folks first to utilize, and then to be able to roll that out externally, right? It was like, that is the biggest bang for our buck right now, versus maybe automating some workflows and things like that. We're like, you know what, that's okay. The administrative burden isn't really worth it because of the scalability of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been playing in a similar way, Ben. We've been playing around internally, right? Like, we have a few pet projects at Yeeboo where our developers are playing around with chatbots, and we're putting them on our websites or beta versions just to see what it does. There's an obvious potential use case here where it becomes some sort of digital donor care center.
Right.
But it relies so heavily on the information input that you need to be able to trust what it's making up, right? Can I cancel my monthly donation? No. Shut up. Is like, it's not the answer we want it to be giving.
We don't talk to recurring donors.
Right, exactly.
Are you a recurring donor? Or we don't
exactly. So we're playing around with it as much, I think, as you guys are, as tech partners are. The cool part about being on this side, obviously, we love working with our nonprofit partners, but the fun part about being on the agency or the tech side is we have, I think, more capacity to hopefully bring you a more finished product or a final answer that doesn't rely on your testing given your limited resources.
So these last two questions I'm going to kind of combine, and it's, so how would you currently need to provide the context for things like donor profiles, organizational focus channels, every time you open up and use ChatGPT, or does it remember? Does it make content that's unique for each user?
I can answer that, actually. So you can create a chat and it can save that chat. So you can refer back to statements you made earlier. But that's if it's working. Sometimes it doesn't save the chat and you have to reload. So if you're able to work in the same channel, then you can say, please refer back to my first statement, look for the context here, and you can direct it, but you do have to be very clear in your instructions. Sometimes you can even ask for technical help, and it may give you one piece of advice, then you realize you missed a very essential piece of context that it's required to give you the answer. So definitely can retrace its steps and go back to other parts, but that's if it has access to that historical data. Hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about it is you can ask it, oh, do you know about this thing? Right? So for instance, I was working on some copy and I said, do you know about the technology adoption curve? And it was like, yes, I know about the technology adoption curve. It wrote it out. I was like, it definitely knows what the technology adoption curve is. I then said, can you take that knowledge and can you please rewrite marketing copy for innovators and early adopters for what you just put? Right? And so I'm in control of knowing, like, okay, it's not feeding me some BS on what the technology adoption curve. It actually knows what that thing is. So now I can trust it to then take it, right? And it's working in an augmented fashion like that back and forth.
Yeah, and I can say I did use it to try to analyze some information on the internet. So I provided ChatGPT with certain links, and I said, read these links and then summarize for whatever I was looking for at the time. And it did do that for some information. But for other information, I actually asked it to go into Engaging Networks, the portal, to get me information that I needed as a search engine. And it made up a URL for Engaging Networks for a supportable article, which actually didn't exist. So it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. So, well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.